Coming up, April is Sexual Abuse Awareness Month. Plus, ICT brings you a special new report called At the Crossroads. And looking for feathers? Liberty Wildlife can help. I am Aaliyah Chavez. Join us for those interviews plus headlines from the ICT Newscast.
The Walter Cronkite School of Journalism and Mass Communication at Arizona State University is honored to be a supporter of Indian Country Today. ASU offers the only online undergraduate digital media literacy degree, teaching students how to recognize and combat inaccuracies on all platforms. They are using cutting-edge tools and tactics to separate fact from fiction in a digital world overloaded with misinformation. Learn more at cronkite.asu.edu.
This is the ICT Newscast with Aaliyah Chavez.
Ku'watsi Hopa. Thank you for joining us. Shame, pain, and an apology. Those were the sentiments the head of the Catholic Church made to Indigenous leaders. On Friday, Pope Francis made a historic apology for what he called deplorable abuses. He begged for forgiveness for all that Native children suffered in Catholic-run residential schools in Canada.
For the deplorable conduct of those members of the Catholic Church, I ask forgiveness of the Lord. And I want to tell you from my heart that I am greatly pained, and I unite myself with the Canadian bishops in apologizing.
Before Friday, the Catholic Church had never made an apology for its role in stealing and assimilating Native children. There were dances for healing after the Pope's apology. Outside of Clementine Hall, Indigenous leaders gathered.
Behind the lies, behind the lack of justice, this Pope, Pope Francis, decided to go right through it and decided to speak words that First Nations, Inuit, and Métis have been longing to hear for decades.
Cassidy Karen is the president of the Métis National Council. She said members of the audience were given printout statements of the Pope's remarks in English. She sat next to Angie Creer, who is one of her elders. Karen outlined what happened next.
Angie and I were sharing a book and reading the book together. I pointed out the words, "I am sorry." She broke down into tears, and it was so moving because I know how important that is to her, and I know how important those words are going to be to our survivors back at home, which is why we will continue to advocate for Pope Francis to share those words, those sentiments, what he's learned and what he's heard from us back on our homelands.
The Pope said he will travel to Canada in the days around the feast of St. Anna, and that falls on July 26th. Staying with news in the north, a First Nations veteran says footage of fleeing Ukrainians sealed his decision to help. It's been more than a month since the Russian invasion of Ukraine began. At least 1,100 civilians have been killed in a conflict that shows no signs of ending. Citizen Sam Sutherland decided to go after seeing videos of Ukrainian women and children fleeing the country. The Canadian Armed Forces veteran is completing physical training and brushing up on his rifle skills to get ready. The husband and father of 3 says it was a difficult conversation with his family, but he feels supported. Sutherland flies out next week, beginning his journey, which could last anywhere from 1 to 3 years. The Eel Ground First Nation has donated $1,800 in support of its citizen while he is abroad. An agency in the Department of Commerce is helping tribal nations upgrade their high-speed internet. Last week, the National Telecommunications and Information Administration announced 4 awards within its Tribal Broadband Connectivity Program. These grants total nearly $1.2 million. They will fund projects to expand internet access. The St. Croix Chippewa Indians of Wisconsin has received a $300,000 grant. It will now be able to fund the installation of last-mile fiber and will bring broadband to the rural tribal community of Round Lake. Adam Geisler, the lead for the Tribal Broadband Program, spoke to ICT about some of the challenges tribal communities face.
We know these communities. I have stepped foot in many of these communities. I have seen the challenges. I have heard from the parents firsthand. All the members of my team have similar experiences, and that is what keeps us moving through this process. So I guess what I want folks to understand about the work that we're doing is that we view this as a necessity.
Geisler says another announcement of nations receiving tribal broadband grants will come in a few months. A new documentary about Native mascots is gaining buzz. The film is called Imagining the Indian: The Fight Against Native American Mascotting. The film examines how Indigenous logos, names, and mascots are used in the sports world. It premiered this weekend at California's American Indian and Indigenous Film Festival in Temecula. This is a festival that highlights the best of Indigenous filmmakers throughout Indian country. Imagining the Indian aired at the end of the festival on Sunday and even had a Q&A opportunity. And those are the headlines for the ICT Newscast. Coming up, we're taking in all the sights and sounds of the non-eagle feather repository, Liberty Wildlife. But first, more on economics and resources for Sexual Abuse Awareness Month. Stay with us. April is Sexual Abuse Awareness Month, and this is a major issue in Indian country. In some cases, people may not even know what that abuse looks like, or even if they are in a sexually abusive relationship themselves. One source people can reach out to for help is the Strong Hearts Native Helpline. Joining us today is Lori Jump. She's the executive director of the organization. Hi, Lori. Thanks for being here.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Give us some data. How widespread of an issue is this in Indian country?
Well, it's huge, unfortunately. You know, the most recent data that's been put out at a national level was the 2016 National Institute of Justice report that shared that 56% of Native women have experienced sexual violence. And when you look at that number, 56%, that's huge. And 96% of perpetrators have been non-Native persons, so somebody from outside of our communities.
And when you're actually defining sexual abuse, what is the definition, or what are the kinds of signs that people should be looking for?
Yeah, so sexual abuse is any sexual activity that occurs without consent, right? And so consent is, a mutual agreement to engage in sexual activity. It's free and clear, and it's ongoing, right? So you can revoke consent at any time that something makes you uncomfortable. But it can be, sexual violence really covers a lot of ground, right? It can be something as simple as calling you, names. It can be something simple as well, I shouldn't say simple because it's never simple, right? But grabbing at you, touching you inappropriately can be, something when you're having sex that's coerced. So forcing you into it against your will. Again, any type of activity that occurs without your consent.
And is there any particular age group that's particularly prone to experiencing sexual violence? I know that you said there was recent data, but tell us more about the sort of age gaps.
Yeah, I think we see it across the lifespan, really. I think it does change sometimes in terms of, younger people that are experiencing sexual violence in a dating relationship, and young adults, I think, have higher rates, as opposed to, sometimes when you get into the older or middle-aged and older age groups, it's sexual violence that it's occurring in a relationship. And so it can occur in a relationship, as opposed to, so many people think that, sexual violence is at the hands of, some dirty old man, right, hiding behind bushes. And that's just not our reality.
You mentioned earlier that a large number of these cases where Native people experience sexual violence, that the people who do this, the perpetrators, are non-Native. Can you talk more about that and maybe why legislation like, say, the Violence Against Women Act are even more important?
Yeah. So, somebody told a story once about, speeding down a highway, right? And it was an area that was unpoliced. And so they knew that they could go there and speed and get away with it, right? And so that's very much what sexual violence has been in Indian country. The Oliphant decision that was from 1978 really, reduced our ability to prosecute people who were non-native. And so the most recent Violence Against Women Act that was just signed by the president is going to restore that jurisdiction to us so that somebody that commits sexual violence on Indian property against a Native person will now be able to be prosecuted by tribes. And I think that that's a huge step. It's something that we've been really fighting to have restored to us. And so I'm excited for, the enhanced safety measures that tribes will be able to use to keep their citizens safe.
Staying on this topic, the other key provision of VAWA in tribal communities is that now that tribes can prosecute perpetrators who commit violence against children specifically. Can you talk about how that's even more important, given that, as you just mentioned, there's no age differentiation between age groups and who experience sexual violence?
Yeah, I think that that's really a critical piece, right? Again, we've had some restoration. In 2013, they did a pilot project that allowed tribes to prosecute domestic violence. And so we've been really working hard to get additional crimes under that umbrella for tribes to be able to prosecute. And we did get crimes against children. And so that can be, a lot of times that's physical violence, right? Sexual violence. And given tribes the ability to prosecute those, on their own terms is so critical, because we know that so many cases are not picked up by our federal partners. And so this really is giving an avenue for justice to all of our relatives. It's very, very important.
Lori, before we end this interview, I, of course, want to talk about resources for people who may be listening to this interview and say, hey, I need help, or hey, where can I turn to? So tell us about some of the resources that Strong Hearts offers.
Yeah, so Strong Hearts is a 24/7 helpline for Native Americans experience domestic or sexual violence. Our advocates have a deep understanding of tribal traditions and culture, tribal laws that may impact their ability to get justice. And really, one of the most important things we do is just offer peer support. It takes a lot to be able to reach out and ask for help. And so having somebody that they can turn to in a time of need that they can trust is critical. We also offer referrals to, services that might be located in their community for ongoing support.
And what is the number that people can call?
1-844-7-NATIVE.
1-844-7-NATIVE.
Correct. You can also reach out to us on our website and chat with us at strongheartshelpline.org.
Well, Lori, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
ICT brings a special new report called At the Crossroads. It brings together the Institute for Nonprofit News and 9 other news partners, all in an effort to answer the question, what is the state of the economy in Indian country? Joining us today is ICT Senior Editor Diana Hunt. She is leading this special report, which starts Monday. Starting on Tuesday, we will post 3 stories a day, and you can find more by visiting our website at indiancountrytoday.com. Hi, Diana.
Hi.
So let's start off with the first story in this series. What are the major takeaways?
Well, we wanted to evaluate what was happening with tribal economies, where the jobs were, where the jobs are going to be. And so this story by editor-at-large Mark Trahant looks at tribal enterprises and the impact that the governments can have, not just on their own communities, but in the rural communities. And what we found is that tribal contributions are a well-kept secret. There really aren't any good numbers that document the impact the way we have with other businesses and other enterprises. But we put together a compilation of we looked at renewable energy and casinos and agriculture. We looked at all of these and concluded that tribal communities have a multi-billion-dollar, tens of billions of dollars in impact on their communities, particularly in rural communities.
I understand that the state of Oklahoma is a great example of how tribal nations are a key player in providing resources to the state.
Yes, we had 3 different partners from Oklahoma, different. Some are tribal media, some are members of the Institute for Nonprofit News. We looked at the Potawatomi Fire, which is a new minor league basketball team that the Citizen Potawatomi tribe has started, and the kind of impact that they're going to have on their community, the reaction from the public. It's a lot of fun, and it also is a business. So it's we looked at that. We have a partner who looked at that. That was KOSU Radio. We have the Muskogee Media looking at agriculture and the marketing of reservation-worthy meats and other foods, along with a big ranch that values not just the profits, but the lands that the cattle are on. And then we have the Osage Nation, which is building new partnerships to try to improve not just the conditions and the options for tribal members, but for the whole region. Partnerships are going to be important as the years advance.
At a very high level, Diana, help us understand why this kind of reporting on why the state of Indian country and the economy is important.
Well, it's easy to look at one individual place and say, oh, there's an issue here, there's an issue there. But when you step back and take the big picture, you get a sense that a lot of things are going on all over the place. And they're trying different things, different approaches. What one tribal community might be learning could be helpful for another tribal community. We also found that the issues are all there are a lot of similarities. There are the same concerns and issues, and everybody is looking at some of the same things. Do they need to diversify beyond casinos? What about renewable energy? Those are all issues that are being talked about all across Indian country, and we wanted to assess what's going on and how it's impacting those communities.
You've talked a little bit about this already, but what are some of the other topics and news stories that we can expect to see in this special report?
Yeah, we have we're going to have 9 more stories. We have the first one today, which is the overview story, and then we're going to have 9 different issues zeroing in. Several are going to be on green energy. We have lithium mine that's causing lithium is considered key to providing batteries for electric vehicles, for example. But the mining process can be destructive in the areas where it comes from, and that's going to impact. Could impact some tribal communities in Nevada and Oregon. So we looked there. We looked at renewable energy like wind, solar, water. We looked at cleanup, the problem with abandoned uranium mines in New Mexico is bringing up a new industry built around cleaning up those mines and getting tribal citizens and other people trained to do the proper kind of cleanup. So that they're not just moving the contamination around; they deal with it. And then we also have the agriculture story that I talked about. We have a number of other stories that look at all different communities and different issues.
The other really big part of this series, of course, is the fact that ICT had conducted a survey of its own to try to find out more information about this topic. Tell us what some of the takeaways were from this survey.
Yeah, we were really pleased with the survey. We went into it not knowing what to expect, but we ended up with more than 200 responses from more than 250. We had a lot of people from all over the country in 38 states. More than 130 tribes were represented by the responses, and they all there was an interesting. They were very thoughtful and careful in their responses. They believe that the future jobs for Indian country are largely going to be in healthcare. That's no doubt a response to the pandemic, but I think it has opened people's eyes to the need to have those resources and to have people who can staff those jobs. We have green energy is seen as a job of the future, that renewable solar, all of those combined could be important in the communities. And then the other surprising information I thought is that the oil and gas industry and the casinos are seen as taking a little bit of a backseat, that they aren't perceived as being the drivers that they are today. And so we'll have to see where it goes, but there were a lot of interesting responses, and we were pleased. It was distributed nationally by Indian Country Today, and then the partners also distributed it within their own communities and added some of their own questions as well.
Well, again, for those people watching, you can find more at our website, indiancountrytoday.com, and we'll be posting multiple stories a day all through the end of this week.
And I should also add that this is funded by grants from the Walton Family Foundation as part of a rural news network looking at rural communities.
Well, Diana, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Liberty Wildlife nurtures the nature of Arizona through wildlife rehabilitation, education, and conservation. A non-eagle feather repository in Phoenix, Arizona, it's starting to ramp up again after the pandemic slowed down the number of orders. As Patty Tholahongwa reports, Liberty Wildlife has plenty of feathers from birds all across the country.
He's so cute. So this is Quanah. He's a turkey vulture. They love the sunshine, love the warmth.
Quanah is just one of dozens of birds that live at Liberty Wildlife. This sanctuary is a partnership with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. These are birds that have been injured and need medical care. Some recover and can be released back into the wild, while others live out their lives here. Robert Mesta is the director of the Non-Eagle Feather Repository Program. He saw a decline in the number of requests for feathers in 2020.
But it was obvious from what we saw around us in the Native American community, you know, powwows were being canceled, gatherings were being canceled, and as a result, people just weren't requesting feathers because they weren't using them.
Mesta is retired from the Fish and Wildlife Service. He's an ornithologist with an area of expertise in the recovery of endangered birds of prey. He directed the national and international programs to recover the California condor, the bald eagle, and other birds of prey. He says they get some feathers from police agencies, zoos, museums, and other wildlife sanctuaries. What about the birds here that are, on exhibit here? Do you also take the feathers from the birds that live here when they die naturally?
Yeah, well, a good source of the feathers we have in the inventory actually come from our own collection. We have birds here that we had for many, many years, and they molt their feathers every year, and the keepers are instructed to collect those feathers for us, and of course they go straight to our repository.
Really? I didn't know that.
The law doesn't allow Mesta to distribute these eagle feathers when they molt or when the bird dies. Instead, he sends them to the Eagle Repository in Denver, Colorado.
I like to joke that they only have to worry about two species, right? The bald and golden eagle, and we have to deal with the other 900 plus species that exist in the United States.
He's filled feather requests from people from 210 different tribes in 45 states. You have to be from a federally recognized tribe in the U.S. to get the free feathers.
In this drawer alone right here, we have Harris hawks and Fujian's hawks, red-tailed hawks, great horned owls, Swainson's hawks, and zone-tailed hawks, gray hawks, common black hawks. So literally, we just basically have thousands and thousands of feathers behind these cabinets right here.
Some people request the entire bird. For those large orders, he has freezers stocked with several species.
Most of our donations are actually whole carcasses, and we store them in a series of freezers by species. And for instance, this is Swainson's hawk. So these will be all Swainson's hawks, and these are red tails and more red tails here. And so this is how we store them, keep them frozen.
And sometimes people who receive the feathers send him photos of what they've made.
And also, we've gotten some really nice notes, you know, the feathers help pull a family through a period when there was cancer, an adoption, the loss of a child, it really makes the effort worthwhile, it really makes me believe in what we do.
He encourages people to visit the website libertywildlife.org to send in a request.
I feel fortunate to be here. I think it's a big responsibility, The repository has the potential to affect thousands of Native Americans in a very, very positive way. And so I take the job very, very seriously, both professionally and personally.
You fly back over? And Squilly?
In Phoenix, Patty Tholahungva, ICT News.
And that's a slice of our Indigenous world. For more news, visit IndianCountryToday.com. From all of us in the newsroom, stay safe, my relatives. I am Aaliyah Chavez.
Sometimes you got to take a stand just because you know you can. Oh, you got to run, you got to run.